GMC presents Center Stage with Michael Kay. Now, here's your host, Michael Kay.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to Center Stage. Today's guest is a native of London, England. As a child, he enjoyed acting and playing the drums. At the age of 19, he answered an ad in a music trade newspaper by a rock band seeking a drummer, and he got the gig. 5 years later, the group's lead singer left, and he became the face and sound of Genesis. By the end of the 1970s, the band Genesis would begin recording hits. In the early 1980s, he did the same with his own music. As a solo artist and band member, he would score more top 40 hits in the 1980s than any other artist. Over the course of his career, he has sold over 250 million records and CDs, scored 9 #1 singles, 7 Grammy Awards, and won an Oscar. This Hall of Fame musician and songwriter's latest release is Going Back, a tribute to America's Motown sound. Please welcome a headlining drummer, keyboardist, composer, rock-singing superstar, actor, and humanitarian, Phil Collins. A lot of stuff. You ever sit back at night and go, wow, I've had a heck of a career?
Yeah, and it only really comes up when something, if I do something like this, you know, people will say what you've done, and forgot that.
You did your first final farewell tour. Now, the one that you're on now, is that the second or the third final farewell tour?
Well, 2004, my wife, at the time, we were going to have a baby, and I decided that with 2 young boys, we would, I'd sort of stop the touring. So I went out just one last time because I had this hearing problem in 2000, which I thought would stop it prior to that. But eventually, you know, the brain kind of adjusts and you get used to it. So I thought it'd be nice to go out and just say goodbye to people, you know, like go around the world and just do it once more. So that's what I did, and of course I called it something funny, like the first final farewell tour, just because it's, you know, English humor.
All right, tell me about Going Back. It's a new record. It kind of honors Motown. Why?
Well, it's the music I grew up with. I mean, as well as the Beatles, which of course everybody grew up with. For me, it was the Motown records that I really gravitated to. So for me, it's the soundtrack of my life, and I've never sung these songs apart from in the school band.
You don't interpret these songs. You pretty much do them as they were done. Why'd you go that route rather than giving your own spin?
Well, because this is the way they sound best, you know. I mean, it's strange because I am aware anyway that people will say, well, if you've got nothing new to do with it, why not just leave it alone? But it's purely selfish, you know. I paid for this to be made because I wanted to sing it. And I think when people try to fool around with some of the classic stuff, you know, you realise just how good the classic stuff was. So we went with every drum fill, every sound, even the way the stereo was split. We got 3 of the Funk Brothers, which were the guys that played on the original stuff. They came over and played on everything. It was fantastic fun. When
you were growing up, who was your favorite Motown artist?
Probably the 4 Tops were, because they had, certainly in England where I lived, they had just one hit after the other, and they were just rammed full of hooks, and you know, they were just such great songs.
Now, in the last couple of years, Phil, you've had some health issues. You mentioned the hearing, and also your inability to play drums.
Yeah.
I mean, how has that affected you? I mean, this is something that you've done since you were a child.
Yeah, well, it gives me some time to do something else, you know. I mean, I'm quite philosophical about it. You know, I've been playing since I was 5 years old, and I'm 59. You know, that's a lot of bad sitting, a lot of bad posture.
Is that what did it with the vertebrae?
Probably, yeah. I think actually, no one knows because it never hurt me. So I was just wandering around with this thing. I had 4 vertebrae that were crushing my spinal cord, and I didn't know.
Right.
And I think the back just said, hey, enough, you know. But it didn't hurt. So my only knowledge that something was happening was the fact that my fingers were getting numb.
But no pain?
No pain, no. And so I had an MRI just to sort of start ticking off the things that could be the problem for the fingers, numbness in the fingers. And the doctor straight away said, well, you got these vertebrae that are crushing the cord. That must be it. So I had that operation, and they're all screwed back in place now. And then I waited a year. Another doctor said, well, it's not happening. It's no different. So I went to another two specialists in another hospital, and they suggested I had an operation on my elbow and one on my palm. Wow. And now I'm just waiting. When I did the record, I taped the sticks to my hand.
I read that. Did you have to tape your hands closed?
Yeah.
And you still had the same feel?
No. No, it felt horrible. But I had to play, you know, because I had the decision to make after we listened to a take, or as we were about to listen to a take, having done it. Did I take the stick off or not? Because it was like really wrapped around, and you know, if I took it off, it was another 5-10 minutes to put it back in again. And as my doctor now, and I'm telling the story. I can't tell it any faster than this. And so sometimes I'd take it off, but other times I'd walk around like Dr. Strangelove, you know, sort of with this stick in my hand that was likely to poke my eye out at any moment.
So there is hope that you could drum again, without pain and without being
There is
taped.
hope. I mean, I can play, but I just can't play very well.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's no way I've got the power that I did have. You know, if I had to play in the air tonight or something, I couldn't do that now. I mean, I could do it with one hand, but...
You said it flippantly, you know, you can do other things, but 54 years you're doing this, and you're not just doing it, but you're one of the best that's ever done it. Do you miss it? Do you sit there and get sad and feel sorry for yourself?
Yes.
I'm going to make you cry, Phil.
But, you know, it's nothing, really. I mean, I've 50 years of mucking about, and now I've got to do something serious, you know.
Now, you mentioned In the Air Tonight, and in The Hangover, Mike Tyson plays the air drums. Did you know that was coming, and did you like it?
Oh, I loved it, yeah, I loved it. I was told by someone, I mean, obviously, if they're going to use your song in the film, they usually let you know, because you have to buy the rights for it and all this kind of thing. But again, when you hear that Mike Tyson's going to sort of air drum to it in a proper film, you think, well, that's not going to happen. Someone's going to say, this was a good idea last night, but maybe not in the cold light of day, you know. It was great to see Mike Tyson get the guys to sing it in the movie and then flatten him.
Everybody either does air guitar or air drums.
Yeah.
So when people do air drums, are we even coming close to what you do? I mean, do we look like fools
You
to you?
You do, Michael.
Yeah, I look great, right?
You do, really, yeah. Well, I tell you what surprised me was in the NFL, there was a huge amount of players. They go out there and warm up to it. They play it in the stadium.
Right.
I guess it's because of that feeling of something's happening, and then the break with the drum fill, and it's you know, and they all go crazy for it.
Now, I was reading some stories that you were putting together some archival stuff of yourself from the 80s. And you didn't like the way you came off.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I was actually, you know, most things I do, people send me, you know, VHS copies of, and I've got loads of them. So I thought I'd put them onto DVD, and of course that involves me sitting there saying, yes, that bit's okay. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. But I came off a little smug, I suppose. I don't know. I just was there everywhere, and I think the critics that didn't like me probably have justification because I was just always there. I mean, people did find that I was annoying, but the fact that I wouldn't go away, there was some justification. I didn't mean to be smarmy, you know. I didn't mean to be this way. I guess I came off that way.
10 minutes in, you don't seem smarmy or annoying yet.
Okay. There's time, though.
Yes, there is. When we come back, we'll go back to Chiswick, London, and see where it all began for Phil Collins when Center Stage returns. Welcome back to Center Stage, everybody. We're talking with singer, songwriter, musician, actor Phil Collins. So it started in Chiswick, England. It's spelled Chiswick, but it's pronounced Chiswick.
Yep, like Leicester Square, or, you know,
Okay.
the English are a bit perverse when it comes to writing the names of the towns.
What did your parents do, and what was life like in the Collins household?
My mother, she ran a toy shop, and then when that had to be sold, she then went on to start an agency for theatrical kids that wanted to get into the theatre. You know, commercial television was starting. So she did that from home. My dad did the same job all his life, 40 years in an insurance company. And I thought, up until relatively recently, I thought he liked that. And it turned out that he ran away to sea before he got married. And then his father brought him back and said, you're going to do exactly what I do. You're going to go into the City of London and you're going to like it.
All right, now when did your fascination with music begin?
Well, there was music around the house. You know, my sister had a record collection, but it was mainly early rock and roll, and my brother liked country and western. So I don't know really why I got into music, other than the fact that, of course, when I was 13, when I was 12, 13, that's when Please Please Me came out, you know. And really, after that, it was pretty obvious.
How did the drums start? When did you first start
Well,
doing
when I was 3 years old, my uncles, they gave me a drum for Christmas. Just a drum, you know. And apparently I really did take to it. And that made them, 2 years later, make me a little drum kit that fitted in a suitcase. And I used to play in the living room while they were watching the TV, you know, which must have been hell. But I did it until I was relegated to the bedroom.
But you liked it right away?
Oh, yeah, took to it straight away. I never wanted to do anything else.
All right, now you started your professional training at the age of 14 at something called the Barbara Speake Stage School?
Yeah, that's the lady that ran the dancing school, and she asked my mother to start the theatrical agency.
And then you played the Artful Dodger.
That was the first thing I did.
That was your first role?
Yeah.
Were you great at it?
I don't know, you know. I had a fantastic part.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, Lionel Bart's Oliver was 4 years on from that point. You know, and it had yet to open in the States, I think. But it was a wonderful show, wonderful show.
Now, a little known fact, well, not to you, you lived at 1964, you were an extra in the Beatles' Hard Day's Night. What was that like?
Loud, because we all 3 or 4 or 5 different stage schools all got told to send 50 kids down to this theatre in central London. We just moved into the theatre, sat down, and there was the Beatles drum kit on stage. And I said, my God, I get a chill just saying it. I mean, this is them. This is something to do with them. And then they bounded on stage and did She Loves You and Tell Me Why and I Should Have Known Better, you know, all the songs that were in the movie. And everybody just screamed, just stood up, screamed. And
Which is what you were supposed to do, but you really did.
Exactly, and I'm sitting there like this, watching.
Right.
I was mesmerized.
All right, now 6 years later, in 1970, you're playing drums for George Harrison on a song.
Yeah.
I mean, did you talk with him about it at all? Did you guys discuss your starring role in the movie?
Yeah, because I feel sorry for the kid that actually is in the movie. There's a kid, a blonde kid, could have been me. And of course now everybody thinks that is me, because I'm in the film. But in fact, that is somebody else who really deserves his own credit. And years later, George gave me, he was remastering the record, and he gave me a DAT tape of my possible performance. And he says, could this be you? You know? And I went home and listened to it, and it was awful. It really was awful. He called me up and said, did you get my tape? And I said, yes, I did, and it's ruined my life.
Wow.
And then he said, no, that's not you. No, I just made that as a practical joke.
Oh.
There was a friend of ours who played, and he said, just play badly and I'll put him up really loud. We'll send it to Phil, he'll have a laugh. So, it's like roller coaster emotions,
That's
you
just
know.
brutal.
Like,
All right, now before you joined Genesis, these are the bands that you were with. Bloody Ages, Johnny Walker and the Walker Brothers, Hickory, The Real Thing, Freehold, and Flaming Youth.
right.
Now, your first record deal was with Flaming Youth, and you released Arc 2. What was that band like? What was the sound like? Were you happy with it?
It wasn't a very good album at all, you know. And we weren't actually playing that kind of music ourselves, but this was a job, you know. This was not a well-paid job, but it was a job. And we got £5 each, which is like $10 each, you know, and that was a week. We did that for about a year, but we weren't working enough for my money, so I then started looking around and saw the advert for Genesis.
All right, when we come back, we'll have the genesis of Genesis in just a moment on Center Stage. Welcome back to Center Stage, everybody. Our guest is legendary musician Phil Collins. Now, Phil, in 1970, you said you answered an ad in a British trade paper for the band Genesis. Were you familiar with their music? Did you like them?
No, I had no idea who it was for.
It was just a band.
It was just the advert had a square around it, which meant it was important.
Okay.
You know, and I happened to know their manager from years before, so I actually went up to the West End club where I knew I'd find him, and I said, "Any chance of getting into this gig?" And he said, "Oh no, you're going to have to audition because they're very, very fussy." I'd heard of them, but I had not heard a note of their music.
It's not that you wanted to expand your musicals. You wanted to make more money.
I just want to make some money, not more money. I mean, this band were working, and really it was all about working. It was at Peter Gabriel's parents' house in leafy countryside of England, you know, Surrey. And I thought, this is fantastic. This is going to be good, you know. And then we were early, so they said, "Why don't you have a swim in the pool and wait until we get round to you?" And I said, "This is getting better all the time." So we had a swim in the pool, and then there was 2 or 3 drummers ahead of me, and I kind of got good ears. So by the time I came to my bit, I knew all the things they were going to ask, and I got the audition.
Now, you didn't know how to read music, right? So
No,
you were
I still don't.
memorizing while you were in the pool what they were doing.
Yeah, I just did it by ear, and that's how I work now. I mean, I can't write music or read music.
You know what's getting me, though? Did you bring trunks, or are you swimming naked?
Now, I've answered this question about how I joined Genesis ever since I joined Genesis, actually.
Right.
Never has anybody asked me that question. No, I can only assume that it was other people's trunks.
Peter Gabriel was the lead singer.
Yeah.
And you did backup vocals and drums. Were you okay with that, or did you want more?
Oh no. I was quite happy with just being the drummer. You know, the drummer was the best gig in the band as far as I was concerned. I sang backup because I could.
Now, Peter was very much into the theatrical aspect of it, the costumes and I mean, was he odd?
Well, no, he got stuck with lots of parts of the music where there was no vocals.
Okay.
So there'd be instrumental things, and he wouldn't know what to do, you know. He'd adopt these little characters, and that character became a hat, and the hat became an outfit, and then the outfit got really out of order.
But did it take away from the music that he's doing
It took
that?
away from the music a little bit. I mean, it was meant to enhance, without a doubt. It wasn't an ego trip on Pete's half. I mean, it was meant for the right reasons. It's just that people kind of wowed, you know, looked at what he had on and what the stage sets were instead of listening to the music. Record company executives would come backstage after the show and push the rest of us aside and say, "Great show, Pete," you know. And of course, it kind of started to rankle a little bit that we were being pushed into a certain direction with the theatrical stuff.
Now, in '75, Gabriel decides to go out on his own. Was there anything that instigated that?
No. No, I said, "Get out of here, slut," and he left. Nothing like that. No, it's the truth of most of these stories are always very, very boring. I mean, he got an offer from William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, and he offered Peter to write a screenplay with him. Pete was the first amongst us to have a young baby, and that was a difficult time for him and his wife. So there's a few reasons why he decided to leave. But he wanted to do this and then come back, and we just, being bloody-minded, we just said, "No, if you leave now, you leave," and that's it. So there wasn't any bad blood. It was a little bit of a confusing period, really.
Now, you guys auditioned hundreds of people for that lead singer.
Yeah.
But my question is, why weren't you the first choice?
Because I wanted to be behind the drums. You got to remember, the lead singers were tall, reasonably good-looking, and could dance, and I was small, pretty average looking, and I couldn't dance. So my position was quite clear from the beginning. I was at the drums, hiding behind them. So our search ended, and we still hadn't found anybody. And then we went in to do this record, A Trick of the Tail, with one last hope. And he sounded bad. And I went in, I said, when he'd gone, I said, "Can I have a go?" And I went down there, and it sounded pretty good. So one by one, we knocked off every song, finished the album, and still didn't have a singer as far as I was concerned, because I was still the drummer.
But you had no ego about wanting to be the star?
Well, it wasn't really a star. I mean, I didn't really take singers too seriously. You know?
Really?
Yeah, the one up there. You know, I mean, I'm the one that's doing this. There's a difference. There's a difference. I don't know if you know what I'm saying here, but there's a difference. You know.
Well, Trick of the Tail ends up with the first album with you as the lead singer.
Yeah.
It's pretty big hit.
Yeah, well, everybody thought we were finished.
Right.
And we tried to keep the news quiet on the, because the English music papers. We tried to keep the news quiet until we were ready. But of course, news had gotten out that Peter was leaving, and that was the end. Oh, Peter leaves Genesis.
Catastrophe.
Catastrophe.
Right.
End of Genesis. That's the end of that. And then Trick of the Tail came out, and it was a good album. So that made, it made it appear even more successful than it probably was, because we'd salvaged something from the jaws of death.
And they became superstars. We'll take that journey with Phil when we return right here on Center Stage. Welcome back to Center Stage, everybody. We're here with Phil Collins. So now we're in 1977. All right, so Steve Hackett, the guitarist, leaves Genesis, and then there are three of you, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks, and you, and the album that you put out, and then there were three.
Yeah.
Okay. That turned out to be another pretty big album, and you had your first commercial hit, Follow You, Follow Me.
Well, that's what made the album big. It was having the hit record. I mean, the album was not really a great album.
How do you tell a great album? I mean,
whether we can listen to it afterwards,
What provides greater inspiration for writing a song? Love, heartbreak, happiness, sadness? What brings out the best?
I think sadness and heartbreak are probably the easiest things.
It's hard to convey happiness?
Yes. No, I find it interesting. I think once you've got those, once you've been hurt and you've gone through those kind of things like a divorce, those memories stay with you. You can tap on those at any point. I think writing a happy song is harder, and therefore, you feel like you've done a job a little bit better if you manage to do that.
So you released a couple of albums in the early 80s, Duke and Abacab, and then you released Face Value, which was your first solo album.
Yeah.
Why'd you decide to do the solo stuff? Was Genesis ticked off that you...
No, I had a meeting with the band when it became obvious that my marriage, it became obvious because she'd left.
That's pretty obvious.
I should have known something was... So I said, hello? Where is everybody?
I think she's left.
And I had two young children, And I said to the guys, I had dinner with the guys in the band, I said, listen, I'm going to Vancouver, which is where they went. I'm going to make this work, and if we can make the band work with me in Vancouver and you guys in London, then we've still got a band, but if not, I'm out of here. And I said, oh, whoa, let's just calm down. You go to Vancouver, see what's going on, and we'll start work on our solo albums. So I went to Vancouver, and it's pretty clear within a month or 2 or 3 weeks of being there, nothing was going to change. So I came back with nothing to do because they'd already started their solo albums. So I started writing, and what I wrote became Face Value. And it was never meant to be an album. It was always meant to be just my little songs as messages for my ex-wife,
All right, so Genesis ends up having enormous success, and then you take another change in musical direction. You recorded the title track for the film Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now. Did you love that song, the way it came out?
That was a song that was left over from my first album because I didn't think it was good enough.
Really?
So it shows what I know, right? I then rewrote the lyrics so that they worked with the movie, which I saw. And then it became actually it was probably one of the earliest big hit songs from the end of a film. And it was nominated for an Oscar, and it was all kinds of stuff. And
and that started one of the weirdest things. It's nominated for an Oscar. You're Phil Collins, and you don't perform the song at the Oscars. Anne Rankin did?
Yeah.
Why? Because you kind of looked ill in the audience when she was singing it.
Well, I have nothing against Anne Rankin. The year before I was up, Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes, for example, had sung Up Where We Belong.
Right.
So I'm on the way to Australia when the Academy Awards are being held, and we said, we're on the way, we could stop off and Phil can sing the song. No, we don't need you. So I said, well, why? No, listen, Paul. I got a letter calling me Paul Collins as well. Which,
no way.
Yeah. And the record was #1 at this point as well.
Right.
So he didn't know who the hell I was, this person. But it was bad blood. There was Larry Gelbart and
That was a guy from MASH, right?
Yeah, he was in charge of the stuff as far as I remember. And he just said, we don't need you, we're doing something different this year, which is fair enough, they do that. Anyway, so everybody's song was kind of acted out or done by not the real artist.
Right.
It wasn't just mine. So when I went and Against All Odds started, everybody turned around and looked at me. You know, see, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? Is he going to stand up and throw, you know? I just sat there trying to look as insignificant as possible. And she did murder it. I can't dance, and she can't sing. It's fair enough. I mean, the song would have been better. I mean, it's not as if we lost the Oscar because of her performance, because they obviously are voted long way in advance. But I also did realise that there is pecking order in this. You know, you can't just mince in the first time round and expect to get it. I felt the same thing with You'll Be My Heart when I got it for Tarzan. And Randy Newman's been nominated 13 times, you know, and I felt so sorry for him because I got it, you know, and because it was my turn, and I felt it should have been his turn, you know.
I promise you, for the remainder of Center Stage, we will not mention Ann Reinking. Phil Collins coming up with more next. Welcome back to Center Stage, everybody. We're here with Phil Collins. So we go to 1984, and you play drums on the charity hit Feed the World. Bob Geldorf to try to stop hunger in Africa.
Yeah.
Who's who of musicians, Phil? What was that like, the whole recording session?
Well, I got a phone call while I was in the middle of recording No Jacket Required, and I'd never met Bob Geldorf, but he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm working. He said, did you see the news last night? I said, no, I didn't, because I'm working. And he said, it's terrible, man. We've got to do something about it. So I want you to come down to the studio this Sunday and play drums on this record that we're writing. We need a famous drummer. He didn't say he needed me. He just said he needed a famous drummer. So I said, I'll be there, yeah. I mean, he scared me into it. But I did not expect everybody else, because obviously that was just the beginning of the whole thing. And as you say, it was a who's who of the British music world. We did that song in an afternoon, and then it was actually mixed and printed, and it was out the next day.
Unbelievable.
Which never happens.
Right.
You know, they actually worked it through, and so it came out the next day. It was #1 the following weekend, and then that led to Live Aid.
Now, Live Aid was in England and then in the United States.
Wembley and
day.
Philadelphia, yeah.
And you were the only performer who performed on both.
Yeah.
Why did you want to do that?
I didn't want to do that. You see, there's such a lot of this stuff that is just by happenstance, you know. I was on the road by this point, and Sting found me in a hotel room on the phone and said, do you want to do something together? Because we'd worked together on my record,
Right.
doing something. I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I would do a couple of your songs, you do a couple of my songs, and then, you know, we'll do a couple of songs on our own. So anyway, we did our rehearsal, and in between time I said, any chance of me playing drums with anybody? Because, you know, I'm kind of good at sitting in behind, just being the drummer behind all these people. And nobody really wanted me in London, because they had their own drummers, you know,
right.
basically. But in Philadelphia, there was Robert Plant, which later became Led Zeppelin. And Eric Clapton was in Philadelphia, and there were two people that I had been playing with, so I could play with them. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, that's a shame they're in Philadelphia. And someone said, well, actually, you could get there if you took Concorde. You could get there in time for their set. And I said, oh, well, I'll do that then. Didn't think about the logistics of it. Just said you could get on a plane and get there.
Now, in '85, you released the album you were working on before they talked to you about this, No Jacket Required. Yeah. 3 #1 hits, won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, and you had a song called Susudio.
Yeah.
What was that about? What did that mean?
Well, that's just, doesn't mean anything. But I you know, like in this improvisational world that I live in when I'm singing, I just sang Susudio.
Right.
Figuring that something would come along that scanned well enough to fit into it.
Uh-huh.
And nothing did. I couldn't find anything that worked as well as it. So I just said, I'll use the word and make up a meaning for the word. So the word ended up being kind of, it was a teenage fixation with a teacher is really what the song was about.
Mrs. Sususudio.
Yeah.